Hey everyone, Rob from Southgate Media Group here. Before we get started with this podcast, we have a quick message. If this is your first time checking out the show, we love that you found us and we really hope you enjoy it. What we have to say is for the subscribers. If you enjoy our shows, would you please donate to help keep these going? We don't want to have to put traditional ads on these shows, but this does cost money. So we really do rely heavily on donations. To make a donation to the show, please go to our website, www.southgatemediagroup.com. Go to the page for the show, and in the upper right-hand corner is a donate button. It takes you right to PayPal, and you can donate whatever amount you want. Thanks a lot for listening, everybody. And now on with the show.
Welcome to the 12 Monkeys podcast, a Southgate Media Group production, where we talk all about Sci-Fi Channel's reimagining of the classic science fiction film by Terry Gilliam. I'm your host, Blair Knight Graves, associate editor from TVBinges.com, and with me today is Kyle Tremblay, the editor-in-chief at TVBinges.com. You can find us on Twitter at BlairLivesTV and at KyleLivesTV. Remember, both Blair and Kyle have an E at the end. You can also follow this podcast's Twitter handle at 12monkeys.pod. Remember, that's at 12monkeys.pod. Hi, Kyle. How are you doing today?
Oh, Blair, we've reached the end.
We have!
We're now stuck in 2015. We've finished our time traveling days, at least until next year, and here we are.
Yes. Today, you and I will be discussing the season 1 finale, season 1, episode 13, titled "Arms of Me." Arms of Mine, which was written by Terry Matalas and Travis Fickett, who are the show creators, and Terry Matalas is the showrunner.
Yeah, Arms of Me is the less popular remix of All of Me, the John Legend song.
Sure.
It's only if you commit your arms, not anything else.
I'll totally
continue.
leave you on that one.
Move on.
So Arms of Mine was the season finale for the freshman year of 12 Monkeys on Sci-Fi Channel. And it was quite an interesting finale.
A lot
of things happened in a very short period of time.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit too many things happened over a short period of time. I don't know how you feel about that.
I don't know. Maybe I would listen to a case of if someone was making that case, which you might do this instant. But
my case is essentially that I thought that there were a lot of moments that could have had some emotional weight that completely lacked emotional weight because we had Aaron's death.
Yes, good.
Or supposed death. I still think he's the witness. I'm really
roll with it.
I'm rolling with it. I'm calling it.
Like Dido, you're going to go down with this ship.
That's exactly what it is. Aaron is going to be a completely scarred and disfigured dude, and he's going to be the witness. Because we found out that Ramsey's not.
Yes, we did find out that he's not. So you're saying this is an Anakin Skywalker situation? / Darth Vader? He's going to become Darth Vader here shortly?
Sure.
After being hideously burned?
I only watched the first of the new Star Wars films. I did not watch the following two, so I guess
I would criticize your nerd credentials, but then the new Star Wars films were all terrible. And to be honest, I didn't watch the last two. I just know that as a cultural reference, so I'm just gonna go with it. I know Darth Vader though at some point was burned. I think.
I don't think that is something that I knew. But I also
really?
Star Wars is not my favorite sci-fi.
Oh well. And send your angry emails to Blair.
Right, yeah.
TVBinges.com.
I like Battlestar Galactica. That's my favorite sci-fi.
Shocker. You've only brought it up 97 times on this podcast.
Yeah, I've only brought it up at least twice every single episode on this podcast. So, yes, Star Wars never really did it for me. And also the first Star Wars Episode 1, I saw when I was a little kid in theaters, and I loved Jar Jar Binks because I was a kid.
Oh, boy.
Right. And now I understand that culturally that's not okay, but,
yeah.
What was I, 9 when that movie came out? When did they come out? 1999 or something?
Yeah. Still unforgivable, but we'll move on.
Anyway, moving on, yes. So I felt, yes, that Aaron's death could have had significantly more weight, and also that there could have been like a lead-in to them beating up Aaron. I don't.
Yes.
I watched it on demand, and part of me was wondering if like my DVR cut off or something. But to my knowledge, just suddenly Cole had captured Aaron, and he was
Yes.
beating him up, and I don't know how we got there.
Yes.
And that
Half of this episode could have been the search for Aaron.
yes,
And we just skipped over that immediately. And that's a choice the show made, and they clearly had a lot more to get to.
yeah.
But I agree with you that that was very rushed, that whole sequence.
It's yeah, I felt confused. Like I was gonna ask you on this podcast, like, was there a scene where they caught Aaron and then started interrogating him? And now I see that the answer is no. They just
No.
went straight to interrogation.
Because the last time we saw Aaron, he was trying to get Cassie in the car.
Yes.
And then she basically punched him, got away, and then we find out that he led the Pallid Man and company to the encounter that ended the life of Cole's father. But this is the first time we've seen him since. So the next time he's on screen or mentioned is him getting beat up in a chair by Cole and interrogated.
Yes.
So
which is just kind of a little bit jarring.
Weird for a character who had been. I mean, there's been stretches of this season where Aaron was sort of not a factor, and there have been other stretches where he's been a sort of peripheral character. But there have also been stretches where he's been very important to the narrative.
Yes.
And so it's weird to supposedly dispatch of a character like that. I agree with you. I feel like he's not dead just because it was such a unceremonious send-off. Him using a makeshift flamethrower in an enclosed space and lighting the room on fire and then getting trapped under a bookshelf and burned to death. Pretty horrible way to go.
Yeah. Pretty good. I'm a sound design geek. His "I'm burning alive" scream was a pretty good scream. I wanted to mention that it was a good scream. I bought it. I believed that somebody was being burned alive more than I did in Game of Thrones. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, wow. So we're in the first 5 minutes of this podcast, and you're taking shots at Star Wars and Game of Thrones. This is your tactic for a big send off for our finale.
Apparently.
Wow. Okay. Jeez. Well, I have to watch Battlestar Galactica now, just so I can criticize it to counter your baseless Game of Thrones claims.
I would love it if you watched Battlestar Galactica.
I know.
No.
I'd be cutting off my nose to spite my face. I'd be playing right into your vicious game.
Yes. But yeah, so Aaron's supposed send off. I still think that there's room for him to maybe be the witness at this point in time. I thought the scene where Jennifer Goins was on stage and like everybody's agreeing with her, and then suddenly nobody's agreeing with her was like weird.
Well, I mean, you're out on Jennifer Goins in general. I was in on that scene.
I didn't like it because I felt like it just took a really strange turn really quickly, and I didn't buy the reaction of everybody in the audience.
No, I didn't buy that at all. They were out way too quick.
Yeah.
they were. Listen, people have. I mean, has anyone seen like the Steve Ballmer Microsoft pump-up videos, which that reminded me of like the annual conference for Microsoft, where he's like dancing on stage. He's like a 50-year-old chubby bald white man like dancing wildly on stage. Like these investor conferences get weird. This is like her talking about the dodo is like the 50th weirdest thing to ever be said at an investor conference.
That's so funny.
So yeah, what I really liked, I should say, is the conference scene was fine. Whatever, I agree with you that the reaction felt a little weird. I liked the scene afterwards where Jennifer was just totally out on Cassie.
Oh yeah, I liked that. And then Cassie slaps her.
You like seeing her get slapped. Which
I
is
really
good.
liked Cassie slapping her.
Yeah, but I liked her like under her breath. Like I hate her.
Yeah, I liked that too.
I felt like that was like no matter how you feel about her acting. I know we're both on the record as you not liking it and me liking it. I felt like that was her best acting moment of the season. That little under the breath aside.
I 100% agreed. I thought that sequence where she tricked them into moving forward was the best acting that she's had besides her first episode. I liked her when they introduced her.
Sure.
I didn't like her as much in later episodes. But I did like her when they introduced her, and I did like her in the finale outside of the weird dodo stuff.
Yeah.
Just because it felt like the speech took a sudden turn and then
Mhm.
everybody left, it was very strangely paced.
Fair.
But so I guess and then, the other part, I thought that the most successful thing that happened in this episode was everything that happened in 2043. But I think that everything that happened in 2015 felt really jarring and fast. And that was strange for me because one of the things that I praise about this show is how well paced it is.
Yeah.
And how unique it is with its storytelling in that it has a really good kind of slow but still adventurous pace.
Well, they also skipped over uh, Cole and Cassie infiltrating the base.
Yeah, they just got in and
They just got in.
security place.
There was one line about the exhaust tunnel, which I'm sure was a shout out to the exhaust tunnel being used in 2043.
Yes.
That Cole knew about that exhaust tunnel because I assume that's the same facility. That's where the time machine is located.
Yeah.
So Cole knew how to get in, which makes sense. It's just a lot of like intermediary steps were skipped over in this episode to get to some pretty big payoffs. I mean, I don't want to I'm not saying like that these were like unjustified, like reckless decisions. Clearly, there were payoffs to be had and plot ends to tie up and new questions to ask. So I mean, I still like this episode. I should say I totally see what you're saying in that there were corners that I feel like were cut that probably could have been dwelled on a little more thoroughly.
Yeah, no, and that's sort of how I felt watching it. I kind of just felt like taken aback a lot by how quickly it was moving. But the payoffs were, I agree with you, they were great. As I said, I thought everything that happened in 2043 was phenomenal. But I always think everything that happens in that time period is great.
Mm-hmm.
And I really liked, the twist of sending Cassie into the future. And I liked Ramsey and Cole sort of duking it out and trying not to hurt each other while duking it out.
I thought the Ramsey Cole entire sequence was where the episode really slowed down and became great. Like,
yeah, I agree.
That was when the pacing, I think, got to a comfortable gear because I think that's why a lot of the other stuff was rushed because that was a long sequence where Ramsey and Cole are talking and then Cassie comes in, and that whole sequence I think was sort of the culmination of this season, which is Ramsey, I think, realizing that he made a rash decision. And we forget, like, he's been living 28 years here. Like, he's not just jumped back in time. He's been here for a long time, living life in real time. And
they addressed. They addressed why they look the same over periods of time.
Because the injections, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So we had talked about that. That was one of our theories on what was going on. So yeah, but I mean, Ramsey's just been living there,
Yeah.
And I think in that time he's come to realize that his sort of, I mean, he still, I think, believes in his cause, but he also admits that he's forgotten what his son looks like. Because it's been 28 years. Like, it's been almost 30 years since he saw his son. I mean, it's, it's understandable. And he also realizes that he's a part of something bigger than he had thought he was. And that this whole plan, he's a bit of a pawn in this whole plan to a degree that I'm not sure he thought he was.
Yes.
And that's, I think, why he ends up not doing what he had been sent there to do, which was destroy the time machine.
Yes.
So
yeah, I agree that the payoff of the episode definitely happened in that sequence. I thought that all three of our leading people were just great. I think Amanda Scholl has been given a lot of range throughout this season, which kind of culminated at the end of this episode. I don't know if you would agree with that, but I really enjoyed seeing her character transform, and I think that Amanda Scholl does a really good job with that transformation of how desperate she becomes by the end to try to save humanity because that's what she believes in.
I would say I would agree with that statement, and also say that in our very first episode, you and I both talked about how we thought and sort of hoped that Cassie would be the center of the show's narrative. and that Cole was the sort of hero of the show, but Cassie is the narrative center, and that hasn't happened. But the show's been very good, and it's been impressive how the show has told that narrative and incorporated all these characters. This episode, the end of this episode, I think accomplished a lot in that regard, and in some other things that we've talked about, where Cassie is now sent to the future, and now she's the time traveler, and I think poised to become the center of the narrative, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, which would be a really cool turn of events, for them to take a turn each in the first 2 seasons, which would make me question what they could possibly do in future seasons. Can they only go back and forth? Can they go together? Like all that stuff. But I agree with you. Like, it's very interesting to see her positioned in that way. Although I will admit that I thought it was a little bit, what's the word where it's just convenient. It's just, I don't know.
Convenient's a good word.
Yeah, it's just convenient that, like, the only thing that they can think of to save Cassie is to send her to the future instead of, like, get her to a hospital.
Yes, that's happened before this season with Cole being sent from 1987 to 2015.
Right.
When he was dying. So
right. Does it remove the bullet or something?
No, I think the bullet's still in her. I think I don't know. I think the assumption is that Jones is a doctor and will take care of her.
Right. That was sorry. Interesting thing was the gentleman who was helping Ramsey. They referred to him as Jones.
Yeah, Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones. He is Jones. Her husband, who she took her name from.
Yes. So, who I assume in 2015 that they don't have the same name yet.
I would assume, yes, correct. Because we saw her in 2015 and she had her maiden name.
Yes.
So, yeah, but so he is the one who. There's that line, like the whole timeline of the time machine itself is very confusing, because there's that line that in order to create time travel we needed time travel.
Yes, which led to like the striking woman Olivia giving her whole speech about how fate is a character itself, just like you have always.
That was Olivia basically articulated my thoughts from at various points in our podcast.
Yes.
Which is that, and we really came to a head with that theme of the show, which is that the idea of fate and destiny versus choice. And Olivia basically laid it out, her view, which is informed, I assume, by not just like personal opinions, like experience, which is that you can't change the big events of the past. That the big events are locked in place no matter what you do. And she was very confident in that. And then we see Cole with the counterpoint of going back to save Ramsey.
Yes.
And she was very certain that Ramsey had died. And also, I don't think that her timeline accounted for Cassie making her way to the future. And so Cole appears to have broken
the cycle.
Yes, broken the cycle, broken the inevitable aspect of history.
Yes.
That's always played out until now.
Which is fascinating.
Yes.
Very well written. I would say the end of the episode was very well written. And very well constructed. Because that's just such a wonderful thing to toy with. As you and I have discussed multiple times with time being a character and that being solidified and it's like the disruption of those big events and all that. But it does make you wonder if they will be able to stop the plague. Like, maybe they can save themselves, but maybe they can't necessarily save everybody.
Yeah. Well, it sounded like Ramsey and Olivia and the whole crew there were very close to guaranteeing the plague.
Yes.
That if Ramsey had destroyed the time machine in which he was the chief investor for, had he destroyed the time machine, that would have been it. Mm-hmm. This whole thing would have happened as planned, because no time machine means no more messing around with the timeline.
Right.
So history would have became inevitable at that point. And so Cole and Cassie stopped him, and now we're in this whole different kind of timeline.
If the time machine had been destroyed, would Cole have ever even gone back in time? Or Ramsey?
No, I think that would have, I imagine that would have blinked Ramsey out of existence.
But he would never want that. He wanted to go back to his son.
Yes. Yes. I don't know because no, it wouldn't have linked because he would exist in 2043, right? It would have because he is just a citizen of 2043. Had there been no time machine, he would have just continued being a citizen of 2043, right?
I see. Yes, I
Yeah.
see.
So it would have, yeah, no time machine would have ended the time travel narrative, but his life would have played out, and Cole's life presumably would have just played out
Sans time machine.
sans time machine, right?
Right.
Had that never happened. So
And he would have had the child either way because that happened before time machine time.
yes, right. He would have presumably just met his wife and had and worked on, as he mentioned Spearhead, that they found the cure. Presumably, history would have played out the same way that it did, which is Project Spearhead finding a cure. And
Mhm.
Ramsey would have been a part of it, and Ramsey's wife would have been a part of it, and they would have found a cure, and presumably, at least for the time being, cured the plague.
Mhm.
And that's how history. And then I assume Ramsey's thought process would have been they would have lived happily ever after in 2043 in this world where 7 billion people have died, but they've apparently stabilized the health of the remaining people.
Yes.
So I think that was the end game here for Ramsey, and for whatever reason, for a variety of reasons, he decided to forego that.
Well, I think certainly for a large reason is he hasn't seen his son in 28 years, and
Yeah.
to a degree, knowing that time travel exists as such, you can almost consider. I don't know that he would, but you can almost consider the future as fiction because so
Yeah.
many things have happened to change it that you can't necessarily know that what you go back to will be the world that you want. But I don't know. That's a lot to consider.
It's a lot to consider. It also has to do with I think Ramsey would have completed his mission had Cole not come in and busted up the place, right?
That's true.
You
Yeah.
know, I mean, I think he was going to do it, and then when he saw Cole again, whom he for 28 years has assumed was dead, he it maybe made him reconsider some things, and maybe he also considered, as he mentions, that Cassie has become very important to Cole, and so Cole has a similar motivation to Ramsey in that he's sort of doing this all for one person in his own way.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe Ramsey just, Cole's been his best friend, and he sort of had just second thoughts.
I don't want to get into the shipping stuff, but do you feel like we were meant to think that that Cole and Cassie are now sort of romantically interested in one another based on that sequence when he sends her back?
Well, they seem to be living together, right? Hasn't she moved in with him? Because she's not living with Aaron anymore?
Well, I mean, he would move in with her because that's her house.
Yeah, you're right. He moved in with her.
Yeah.
But Aaron's not there anymore, so they're just kind of living together.
Yeah.
I think it's intentionally vague.
Yeah.
I think the place they're at is that they have feelings for each other. They haven't been fully explored.
Are you a will they or won't they hoper, or are you a just
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope. I'm not opposed to that romance, and certainly now with Aaron either out of the picture or hopefully from my perspective bitter and scarred, which would be a very interesting look, I think. Bitter, scarred, and committed to making the plague happen is kind of how I want Aaron to come back. But yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a sort of a natural progression for the show. That's certainly not why I'm watching.
Yeah, right.
It's not one of the things I tune in for, but I won't begrudge the show when it goes down that path because it's certainly inevitable.
Yes.
It's been inevitable since the show started. I mean, it's just a question of when and how and what are the details. But
right.
I mean, come on, it's it's TV still.
Okay, well, we talked about the Ramsey did we talk about we talked about Amanda Scholl's performance. Did we talk about the Ramsey performance yet?
Not this episode.
The Kirk Acevedo. How did you feel about how he was throughout the end of at the very end of the series?
I mean, do you have issues with him? Because I just think he's been great for many weeks now.
No, I think he's been very great.
Okay,
I found how calm he kept his speech so jarring.
Yeah.
in this episode, which I know has been something that his character has been doing lately. I guess I'm just starting to like do all, because we've talked about this before, but character voices are so important in this show. Um, like Jennifer Guns has a very specific way of speech. The Pallid Man, Olivia, and Ramsey, though, they all sort of speak the same way.
Yes.
And I try to figure out if that's a thing where you don't age through time. Because the three of them seem to have not aged ever.
Yes.
And so, when you live for a certain period of time, you just learn to speak a certain way. Or I'm wondering if it's the fact that they're all on the same team, and I'm sort of
I think they're all sort of doing a vague kind of menacing villain accent. Like that kind of beat. It's effective. But yeah, I think it's also meant to convey that they kind of know everything, and they're sort of masters of the universe kind of characters, where they've figured this all out. This is all playing according to their plans, and so hence they're very confident and calm. That it's all sort of it's all been written, and I think that jives with Olivia's just unwavering belief that this is all fate. And so she talks like that because she has no reason to ever panic, because everything is playing out exactly as it needs to play out.
Okay.
So that would be my explanation for why they all talk like that, because I agree with you with that observation that they all do talk like that.
They all speak exactly the same way.
Right.
No, I didn't have any issue with Kirk Acevedo's performance. I just was I thought it was particularly interesting how calm and collected he stayed even when he got shot.
Yeah.
Which is why I was wondering, is that a time traveling thing, or is that something that has to do with? I think you're right, though. That's sort of a menacing voice that you can have.
Yeah. Well, I have a question for you.
What?
So the 12 babies.
The army of the 12 babies.
The army of the 12 baby monkeys. So let's just. My question is, let's figure this out.
Okay, yes, I was gonna go into that. So it's good that you did.
Okay. So they are of mysterious origin. Do you have any idea where they came from? What's the deal?
No, I have no idea.
Okay.
They all had nursemaids. I couldn't tell if those were their mothers or if they were nursemaids.
Do not know.
I wouldn't anticipate that they were mothers, but I don't know.
Yeah. So they were all born in 2015 in this compound that's designed. So they are being basically groomed from birth to survive the plague.
Right.
And
they become the white
face
people.
Representing the future, as one says. We represent the future.
Sure.
Which means
that they travel to the future?
Were they sent to the future? Because we know the time machine circa 2015 was able to send things forward to the future. It was sending those plants forward, right?
Right.
That's why the red shrubbery,
forest.
Yeah, the red forest was showing up. That it was
the red shrubbery.
Yes. It's not really a forest. It's like one vine. So It's the red shrubbery for now. Yes. So that's how that was showing up in 2043. It was being sent as part of tests in 2015.
Yes.
So could these babies have been sent forward to the future, raised in the future, and then sent back to take command of the time machine and do something?
That would make sense with how tribal they act.
Would that explain their appearance? They seem vaguely futuristic in appearance.
Yeah, they painted themselves in something. That's the thing I can't decide. Is it that is that how their skin is, or have they painted themselves in something? That was something that I've been, because you can never tell with sci-fi shows. What is meant to represent what. No, I think that's an interesting theory. I thought because the way that man speaks is also similar to the way that Ramsey and Olivia and the Pallid Man speak. The leader of the 12.
Well, it makes sense because he was raised by them, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah.
So, but now it makes sense now that you know that.
Yeah, right.
And but like they said something about like, 23 years later or whatever, 28 years in the future. Again, we're going another 28 years to get to 2043, right? Um, so that it would make sense to me that those people were all 28 years old. They all looked approximately that age to me. So I think I was under the assumption that they were just raised to be this army, and that they would, and that's who they are in the future. But I also did think about I thought about it briefly about, oh, they went to the future and they came back. And now that you're saying that, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, because it seems like their mission is to commandeer the time machine.
Mm-hmm.
Right, like that's what they were there for. When the leader looked upon the time machine, he had a certain reverence to it. I feel like whatever they're going to do from this point forward, their entire existence, regardless of what timeline it occurred in, was to take control of the time machine in 2043.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why.
But how could they have been sent to the future if Ramsey's intention was to destroy the time machine?
I don't know.
Right?
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe they've just lived. Maybe they just lived out the plague, and they say they represent the future as a way of securing the future. Like they're here on behalf of the future to ensure that there is a future.
That's sort of where I think it is.
Yeah, that makes sense. That it still doesn't explain their appearance.
Yeah.
but I guess when you're raised in like a like a nicer version of the Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt bunker your whole life, maybe you just take on weird clothing choices.
Good reference.
Thank you. We're really unloading the reference vault today because it's our last podcast for a while, very likely.
Yes.
Make all our references.
No, that's an interesting. I mean, that sort of leads me to my other question, because I believe that the Pallid Man and the Striking Woman are both time travelers from the future too.
Ooh.
Well, because they don't age either.
Yes, right.
Like we see them in the 90s and we see them in the 2000s.
But do they
in the late 2000s.
Do those two characters exist in 2043? Because I don't think we've seen them, have we?
We haven't, but we've seen them in 3 different iterations of the past.
I bet they are wiped out by the plague. And I think that was what Olivia's reaction to seeing the babies was. She was sort of teary, right? Like you mentioned, she showed emotion for the first time.
Yes.
I bet she knows that the plague gets her. And that was why she was sort of like had this sort of fond reaction to the kids, because maybe she's not immune to the plague. And so she's ensuring her own death by ensuring the plague occurs, but she has some greater purpose that hasn't been revealed to us yet.
Right. That's interesting.
That's my guess, because it's weird that we haven't seen them in 2043, right? I mean, we saw Jennifer Goins in 2043.
We did.
Yeah.
And we saw her age, so she's not a time traveler.
She is not a time traveler, and she is apparently the one who releases the virus.
Yes.
So we've got that happening.
Oh, that's right. I did really enjoy that, by the way.
Yeah, well,
the end of the episode where she's on the plane and yeah.
Which is of course a callback to the movie where it was released by plane traveling. That whole conversation was from the movie, but it wasn't Goins. It wasn't the Brad Pitt character in the film.
No, it was the redheaded scientist.
Yes, the actual bad guy of the film. Because in the film, the 12 monkeys are a red herring, and it's actually the scientist. And the whole 12 monkeys thing is actually not related to the plague.
Exactly.
That does not appear to be the case here, where Jennifer Goins has the has the virus and is.
But she has 13 cases of the virus, right? Didn't they say we're stopping 13 times, or was she stopping 12?
It's either 12 or 13. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But we also see when Cole and Cassie visit her after they leave, she calls someone and informs them that they visited, which I think we're meant to assume is Olivia, but may or may not be Olivia, right?
Yeah, I think we're meant to assume.
She's clearly playing at something. Like she's working with the people behind this, and she's the means through which the virus is disseminated, but there's someone pulling the strings behind the scenes that we don't know yet, but assume is Olivia.
Yes.
So, yeah, stuff's happening. But
yes, lots of stuff's happening.
I wanted to say my very first prediction, very first episode of this podcast, was that Jennifer Goins was going to be the big bad, which has been utterly wrong until this very moment. The last scene of the last episode, she becomes, at least I think, the bad guy of the series because now she's the one who does the plague, right?
Yeah, but I guess so. For me, a big bad. This can
No,
come down.
she's not a big bad. You're right.
No, yeah, no, like for me, a big bad is somebody who has the grand intention of doing the bad thing, and that they're the one who comes up with the idea, and they're the one who thinks that it's right. She's been so brainwashed by so many different people.
Yeah.
She's on so many drugs. Like it's hard. Like she isn't harmless. She's definitely harmful, but she's definitely not like a grand schemer. I don't think. I think she's a survivalist, and
I don't
she's
know what her
mentally
motives are.
ill.
Yeah, right. She's clearly troubled.
Yes.
I don't know what her motives are, though, and I think that's one of our questions: is why is she doing all this? Who is she working with? Why does she want the world to end?
Yes.
And I don't know those answers, and that's probably going to be part of the second season.
Yes.
Yeah.
I had a question for you.
Oh.
But I lost it a little bit.
Were you going to ask for more pop culture references? 'Cause I have a
Yeah.
few more. This episode reminded me of The Wire. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Oh. hold on. Oh, I remember now.
Oh, good. Okay. Jog
Okay.
your memory.
Yes, jog my memory. So I noticed something very interesting at the head of this episode.
Yes.
And this is again, as somebody who works in the television, film, video production world. In the opening credits, normally Barbara Sukowa, who plays
Jones.
Katarina Jones, is listed as one of the series stars, but in this episode, she was listed as a guest star.
I saw that too.
You saw that too?
Yes.
That's
I saw the guest
troubling.
starring.
That's very troubling for me.
Weird.
Because that could indicate that she'll die.
But could that also just be like a Hollywood kind of like she had a contract to be a guest star in this many episodes and start like is that like just a technicality thing?
It can be a technicality thing. I'm gonna drop a Buffy reference right here.
Good.
Because Anthony Stewart Head is a relatively middle, well-known actor in England, much like Barbara Sukowa is known in Germany.
Uh-huh.
And he played the character Giles for 5 seasons on Buffy.
Yeah.
And then he wanted to go back to England because his kids were getting a little bit older. He wanted to spend a little more time with them. So they let him out of his contract, and they're like, okay, well, we'll have your character go back to England, and he'll come back eventually later. And then when he did eventually come back halfway through the 6th season, he was gone for about a season and a half. Every single episode from then on out, he was listed as special guest starring. Because technically he had a contract where if he couldn't be in an episode, he was allowed to not be in that episode, and they would have to rewrite it like out of nowhere.
Oh.
So like she could have something like that, where it's just that, she is, under contract for as long as she can be there. Like maybe she's on a film production or something like that, so she can't like have cross contracts where she's required to be at both. But also a lot of the times that happens when they're going to kill a character off.
Okay. So it could mean something or it might not mean something.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, good.
Well, it just could mean that her contract is not unwavering.
Yeah.
Uh,
So maybe she may or may not be back in the second season. Like,
Yes.
Okay.
But that would be really hard to deal with. I mean, she would have to at least be back in the first episode of the second season.
Yes. Yeah, they could bring her back as a guest star in that episode to kill her off.
Yes.
But I think the show is better off keeping her around.
Yes.
I think that's almost needless to say. She's a big part of the narrative and just
Well, she's by far the best written, best acted character in the show. Like I feel hands down, she's the best actor on the show.
really the best actor.
Yes.
Interesting.
Do you not agree?
I don't instantly disagree. I just think that's a lofty statement that I have to think about a bit.
I think Aaron Stanford is actually coming up as second, because he's been pulling a lot of weight lately.
He's been doing great. He's had a
Yeah.
great season. He only got better as the season went on. I
Mm-hmm.
think he's been really good.
He became much more in the ways that I wanted him to. He became
Me too.
much more like the film version of Cole.
So much of our first episode was spent worrying about that he would be. I think I used the Captain Mal comparison, that he would be sort of firing off quips,
Mhm.
and that's a lot of fun for Firefly. Not as much fun for a show about the end of the world.
Right.
It was tonally not appropriate, and I think the first episode he was sort of on the border of that happening, and since then they've really pulled him back.
Yes.
And I think tonally that character is exactly right.
Yeah, they managed to find the right formula for him, because he's allowed to have a quip here and there that can be, can give you a smirk, but he shouldn't be. The first 3 episodes, especially the first episode, he was just way too smarmy hero.
Yes,
like Mal
smarmy.
Reynolds,
Yeah,
smarmy hero.
he was too smarmy, and he's not at all smarmy anymore.
Yes,
which is really, I think, one of the best things the show did is calibrate that character to his surroundings, and
Yes.
and that's the actor, of course, Aaron Sanford, deserves a lot of credit as well for figuring out the right tack to make this character work in all the ways he needs to work.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, I think Amanda Scholl is great. I think Kirk Acevedo is really, really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a number of candidates for Best Actor on the show, but I wouldn't instantly I wouldn't say you're wrong necessarily, because I do think Barbara Sukowa in Jones is definitely right at the top.
Yeah, I feel like she's just done so much with that material that another actor, a lesser actor, would not have done justice. And she just has so much subtlety to the way that she portrays that character. And then when she wants to be big and loud, she's great at being big and loud. And when she wants to be small and loud, she can also be small and loud. And she can also be quiet in a way that is very haunting. And it's just such a presence on camera. And I thought she had that in this episode when she was, setting up the bomb to destroy the time machine in the future if they were going to come and take it. She was cold and collected, and yet very big with that.
And also acting for the benefit of those around her for the first time.
Yeah.
That she basically admitted defeat with her own beliefs that you can't change the past. She sort of echoed Olivia's sentiment, which is that, this time travel plan failed, that the past can't be changed. And then, of course, a minute later, Cassie comes through the time machine and
shocking everybody.
Yeah, shocking everyone and suddenly proving that the past can be changed, because that surely hadn't happened before. So, so that is now, So
it's interesting though. Will Cassie be able to survive in the future? I assume that the virus is still around in the people that are immune to it.
Great point.
Like they have to. Like I've always wondered that about Cole. Isn't he like a carrier? Like there are people who are immune to things who still carry them.
Maybe that's not how the virus works. Maybe the virus only as active carriers, I guess what you would call it.
Yeah.
What if, proposing a plot here, Cassie catches the virus in the future, they have to reclaim the cure that Spearhead had developed. And that, they destroyed the Spearhead lab that had developed the cure. They have to go salvage, maybe with the help of that Spearhead scientist who's really bitter at Jones. They have to go salvage that research and produce the cure so they can cure Cassie.
I like it.
Yeah.
That'd be a good plot point.
Tying some knots together.
Okay, so for season 2, what are you looking forward to, and what predictions? That could be a prediction that you just listed, but any other predictions?
Well, I made the statement in our last episode that I would be out on this show if Cole just instantly became a time traveler again. And I was confident that that wasn't going to happen, because this 12 Monkeys is a show that respects its audience's intelligence and wouldn't have made such a big deal about Cole not being able to time travel had they planned to, in this finale, undo all of that. And so the decision to make Cassie the time traveler now, I am very much looking forward to her now basically switching roles with Cole, where now he's grounded in 2015 and she's the one in 2043, presumably traveling back and forth now. I imagine she is going to have Cole's role into some extent next season, where she's the one who gets sent back and forth. And so I'm very excited by that thought. The idea that it doesn't just have to be Cole who's the mover of this story, that we can now do it with Cassie. Like what if they sent Cassie back to 1987 You know, like,
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many possibilities now. We sort of reset it because Cole, played out his string as the time traveler, and
Mhm.
now it's Cassie's turn. And maybe they'll go in a completely different direction. Maybe after the first episode they'll have Cole back traveling time again. I mean, who knows? But
Mhm.
I just like the idea that it's now someone else, and they didn't immediately go back on all that they established about it with Cole.
I like it too, and I'm excited for the idea of it, but I'm also concerned because since she's not immune, she has very limited periods of time that she can be sent to.
Unless they
And
cure her.
yeah, unless they cure her, that's fair.
Yeah.
Which you mentioned.
Well, I would
Um,
imagine they send her back to 2015, right? Because
right,
with some sort of knowledge or some mission that involves Cole in 2015.
right. Well, I'm just hoping for a plot where she makes the cure and she puts it in the water stream or something like.
Oh yeah.
Just some kind of way where she figures out how to get it to people before they can even get sick. Which might be incidentally why Barbara and Cole would be immune or something, explain things like that. Not Barbara.
Close. Jones.
Jones.
Yeah.
Barbara's the actress.
Yes. I have that trouble too because Aaron is the character of Cassie's ex-lover, but also the name of the real actor who plays Cole. And so
Right.
I have a lot of trouble with the names on the show.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, I think another thing I'm looking forward to is speaking of Aaron, his hopefully inevitable return as someone who is like hideously scarred and very bitter and like a bad guy. I'm kind of into that.
Witness. He's gonna be the witness.
The witness, yes, I'm looking forward to you being proven right in the end that he is the witness. I'm looking forward to that reveal being back on the table. I think the show did a smart job of hinting that Ramsey was the witness, but never outright saying it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel like a betrayal that he's not. That's one of the things that 12 Monkeys does best. I think is when they do misdirects, they don't sell you out. Like that was speaking. This is the worst of our pop culture references, but like with The Killing. Like, let me just sit down and talk about AMC's The Killing for a bit. That was a show that so didn't respect viewers' intelligence because when they did a red herring, they would sell the farm to sell it, and then it would be like one moment of whoops, that didn't mean anything. Sorry for wasting the last 2 hours of your life.
Right.
And 12 Monkeys is really good about like setting up the misdirects, but doing it in a way where you're not surprised that you were tricked.
Right.
And that's one of the best things that like a mystery show can do.
Yeah. Well, I would.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say The Killing and The Following.
Well, The Following is just a horrible, cynical gore fest. Represents the nadir of humanity. Yeah.
We are dropping all of the references tonight.
We're emptying the chambers. We're the fireworks show, and this is the grand finale. It's all happening.
We only have so much time to bring all these things up.
My gosh, I can't believe it, Blair. We're not going to be talking about 12 Monkeys for almost a full year.
I am really upset about that.
Right?
We've talked about this before, but like, I feel like this is a show that probably could pull a 24 episode season, and I would enjoy it. That being said, it told 11 episodes masterfully.
Yeah.
And it told the pilot pretty well, but it was a pilot, and it told the finale pretty well, but they jumped a lot of start lines.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is it could have been like a 22 episode series based on how much material there was, but it would have been a very different show.
Yes.
In that I feel like the material we covered in this season was plenty and more for one season of TV. Like I think the season ended narratively at the right point. I think they could have stretched this material out and given the quality of the show, I think they would have done a good job and made it not seem like they were playing out the string. Maybe realistically it could have been like a 17 episode season, I think. Where they had 4 extra episodes where like things like Aaron being tracked down and interrogated, like that could have been the A story of an episode, absolutely. And here it was like the E story in this episode. Like they could have had an episode about that. They could have taken some of the material that they glossed over and made that the focal point of episodes.
Like Ramsey and his discovery that Jones was wrong. That could have that could have been at least half more of an episode.
Yeah, we could have got a lot more with the Ramsey lead up, and we could have. I mean, they didn't do like a true bottle episode. You know, like we could have had like the sort of Breaking Bad trick where you have a one episode where it's just not at all related to the narrative. You know, we could have had a Cole and Cassie episode. We could have had a Jones and Ramsey episode. That could have been the bottle episode. Like there's so many characters that could have been, where we just had an episode that didn't advance the plot at all, but really drilled down on two characters.
Right.
So we could have done all that, but it also would have slowed the pace of the show. And I think part of what was enjoyable about 12 Monkeys is how relentless it was, and how every episode felt like it was meaningful in like wow, this episode changed things. Like so often I had that feeling like wow, I feel like I have a different opinion about this show now because of this episode. And if the season was longer, that wouldn't have been the case. There would have been
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, so it would have been interesting. I would say. I don't know if it would have been worse. It just would have been different.
Yeah. That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, who knows?
So now that we're at the end of the season, has 12 Monkeys made you a believer in good sci-fi?
It's made me a believer in 12 Monkeys. I like this show. And I will say, and maybe this is the 12 Monkeys influence, but I've watched the first couple episodes of Daredevil.
Ooh.
Netflix's. Have you watched any of that?
I have not.
Super good. Really, really good. Like already my favorite comic book show, which is like saying it's the tallest little person. But still, it's really, really good. And I feel like Daredevil in different ways, but just in sort of the same sort of spiritual way, is doing for the comic book genre what 12 Monkeys is doing for sci-fi, which is it's taking characters seriously. It's removing the gloss that I really don't react well to. I really hate when shows are glossy, especially shows that are intended to be gritty in some way, like Revolution.
Like Arrow.
Arrow sort of falls back into it. Like one of the things that drew me to Arrow initially is that the show took place in this very dark city, and the people on the show, Oliver was this great archer. He didn't have any superpowers. No one had any superpowers. It was just a guy who shot who shot a bow and arrow and did it really well. And he was called the Vigilante so he was just a vigilante. Like he wasn't a superhero. And Daredevil's the same way. He's just basically a blind guy who's very good at martial arts. That's it. That's who Daredevil is in this series. And I like that vision. I feel like Arrow's way off track now. Arrow now is just this like fantasy world. There might as well be like goblins. But
hey, if Diggle's still there, I'm okay with it.
I love Diggle. Ride or die for Diggle. The rest of the show I'm out on. But anyway, like there's a. I mean, it's hard to like identify a single common denominator. I definitely have to give it a lot more thought. But there's a certain like amount of taking the world and the characters seriously and respecting them and not using them as compost to drive the plot the way that a lot of shows do that are of this genre and are of the sci-fi genre, being character driven as opposed to plot driven, which for 12 Monkeys is really tough because there's so much plot of this show. But I still feel like the show found a way to at least make the characters feel like real people and not just plot cogs. Right. And so Daredevil, you could already tell, is doing that. And yeah, I mean, so I guess to get back to your question, I feel like Hollywood collectively is figuring out ways to tell these stories better. These stories that I traditionally have not responded well to in the sci-fi and comic book genres. That maybe this is just a blip, or maybe they're actually figuring some stuff out and coming up with ways to present this material in a way that at least I like more than the way it's been presented.
Well, I think one of the things is that sci-fi, people who would be writing sci-fi traditionally in the past were people who lived in big fantasy worlds in their heads and created all these worlds, but weren't necessarily great writers. And because it was hard, there wasn't that background material to teach them how to be good writers for these types of genres. The same thing, I always talk about, superhero films before Spider-Man, before Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, are pretty atrocious.
Yeah.
Like their X-Men was okay. For the most,
goofy.
Yeah, they're kind of goofy.
Yeah.
And then, after that, that set the bar higher. And so they had to start getting better because people responded well to well written things within those genres. People liked those big fantasy worlds that also had character dimension and had like dynamic plots and things like that. And so now we're coming to the point where in Vince Gilligan, who wrote Breaking Bad, right?
Mhm.
He started on the X-Files. So like there are ways that good writers can be telling sci-fi stories. It's just been, I think, traditionally harder, and now it's becoming easier. Because it's
Sure.
a genre that people crave, and that definitely means that there are smart people that crave it, as well as people who watch The Killing and the Following,
Yeah. Right.
or Arrow.
But I also think, at the sort of vanguard of any movement, there's going to be some mistakes made, and I think the TV industry certainly looked at what happened with Agents of Shield, and that was a massively hyped show that had a huge premiere and was supposed to change the way TV did business. And by the end of its first season, was like a middling afterthought.
Right.
And it's like, oh, we can't just coast. Like
Right.
we can't just throw these characters out and people are going to eat it up like mindless drones. Like we've actually got to do something here. And so I think what we're seeing with 12 Monkeys and with Daredevil is an elevated level of storytelling that
Yeah.
is a lot more interesting than what we've seen in the past from these kind of genre shows. So I'm all for it. I mean, if this is what sci-fi is going to be, then sign me up. you know? So yeah, we'll see.
Well, I am glad that you enjoyed a science fiction show, and I'm glad that you're enjoying a superhero show, because these are genres that I've been fighting for you to watch for years.
I'm still not gonna watch the Avengers, but
That's a mistake, but
that's nope, best decision of my life. Yeah, no, but baby steps, right? Oh yeah.
yeah.
so make
Um,
progress.
as I said, I always bring up Battlestar Galactica at least twice. I'm really glad to see another sci-fi show on television that is really well written and is about that has a plot that moves at a great pace, and that makes you question fate and reality and gives you all these heady topics to consider, while also having characters that you really care about. And I feel like I've been missing that a lot as a science fiction person ever since Battlestar Galactica ended, and I'm very happy. I was very satisfied with the first season of 12 Monkeys.
Would you consider 12 Monkeys to be the spiritual successor to Battlestar Galactica or to Lost? I feel like it's the latter. I feel like that's what this show kind of, and it hasn't yet captured the sort of manic breakdown of all the plot elements that Lost does, but it seems to me to be more of that vein, where it's what's driving the story are this myriad of questions.
I did not watch Lost.
I didn't either. I just know it as a reference.
I know it as a reference.
Yeah.
I have actually quite a few people in my life who want me to be watching Lost. I think, based on my understanding of Lost versus Battlestar Galactica, that it is a spiritual successor to Lost.
Yeah.
But I think that it has the potential to be better the way that Battlestar Galactica was better, and not necessarily have to fall into the traps that made Lost fail by the time it ended.
Well, people hate the Lost finale, which is why I never watched Lost, by the way, because when I was gearing up to get into it, was right when it was ending, and then everyone hated the finale so much and I also learned what happened at the finale because I'm a person on the internet, and so that's hard.
I actually avoided it. I would like to say I've avoided it.
You have?
Yeah, don't say it.
So in the Lost finale, no. I feel like I could co-host a podcast on Lost and I've heard so much about it just being on the internet. I've never watched an episode. I feel like I could co-host a podcast on it, because just from all that I've heard about it and all the other people, like people who I respect, give long form opinions on it, I feel like I've read so much about it that I've watched the show even though I never have. which is sort of the quintessential 2015 TV experience.
Yes. Well, I could definitely say that that's how I am about a couple of young adult fiction films. Oh yeah, I've heard so much about whatever the Hunger Games. I don't need to see it. I know exactly what happens.
Oh, good.
Yeah, not the same thing. I'm aware.
Yeah, sure.
But
By the way, if I'm going to watch any of Battlestar Galactica, because you keep banging this drum, I feel like you need to watch The Wire. I just feel like it has to happen.
I've watched the first 3 episodes of The Wire.
First of all, the first 3 are just you're being dunked in a dunk tank and holding your breath underwater and have no idea what's happening. Like, no one knows what's happening in the first 3 episodes of The Wire. It's one of those shows where you have to, like, say, I'm gonna watch the first season. I don't care. Like, the first season is going to be watched by me, and you just trust by, like, episode 9 that you're gonna totally invest yourself, no matter how confused you are in the first 3. So
All right.
that's
Well, the same deal that I made for you with Mad Men and True Blood, I will make for you with The Wire and Battlestar Galactica.
okay. So is that our homework?
That's our homework until 12 Monkeys comes back.
We've got to use their time somehow. We don't.
Yes.
If listeners have any recommendations for what Blair and I should watch, send them in.
Yes.
We're gonna have a lot of time, so let us know.
Yes. Hello. If you want to keep hearing our lovely voices,
Yeah.
you can also tune in to our podcast, which is going to be coming off of hiatus, which is called Monroe's Comfy Sweater. It's a Grimm podcast, which is a fantasy show that Kyle and I both love, but we love it knowing what it is.
Yeah.
I don't think we hold it in the same regard that we hold 12 Monkeys. But you should check out Monroe's Comfy Sweater because we have lots of fun on that podcast. And then coming back July 12th is The Strain Season 2. And Kyle and I both do The Strain podcast, which is also on Southgate Media Group. Both of these podcasts are. And you can hear our lovely voices then as we discuss Guillermo del Toro's the book series, The Strain.
Well, we're discussing the TV show.
We're discussing the TV show based off of the book series.
Yes.
And in that podcast, I always read the book and Kyle does not. And we discuss it based on the difference of opinion that we have as an informed person and an uninformed person.
Thanks. I wear an uninformed person name tag. It just says uninformed person.
I
Proudly.
I made it for you.
Yeah, you did. It was my birthday present from you. Yeah, that's so. Yeah, you have plenty of ways to listen to us. We're not going to leave your lives if you don't want us to. If you do, we'll see you next year.
Well, do we have anything else we'd like to say?
No, thanks to everyone for listening to us this year and for enduring our crazy theories. Mostly my dumb theories, and we hope that you've enjoyed our show and also the show that is on Sci-Fi that we're talking about, 12 Monkeys.
Yes. This wraps up our 12th episode of the 12 Monkeys podcast. Before we go, I want to mention a few things. You can download and subscribe to our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. You can also hear all of our podcasts at our website, southgatemediagroup.com. Please subscribe to the show and also rate us. Follow the show on Twitter at 12monkeys_pod. Remember, that's at 12monkeys_pod. And Kyle and I at Kyle Loves TV and at Blair Loves TV. Remember, both Kyle and Blair have an E at the end. Check out our website, tvbinges.com, to read all of our thoughts on TV and vote on what show we're going to binge each month. Thank you again for tuning in, and we'll see you next year.